When something great happens to someone else, have you ever smiled and said, "That's great, you totally deserve that"? But at the same time, you felt this tightness in your chest. It wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness, it was just kind of this loathing, why not me feeling. Well, I used to call that frustration, used to call it disappointment. I even called it just being human or life's just not fair. But it actually has a name: envy. Once I realized how often I was quietly putting myself at the center of every story, I couldn't unsee it. I thought I was a faithful person, I thought I was generous, but in reality, I'm just actually quite self-centered. As a Christian, this statement should be true for me, that I always have joy and happiness for the good of others, and I never consider myself. That's it. That's the standard we're called to be. But the moment I sneak self into the equation, gosh, envy just shows up like it's paid rent. Because when I consider self in the midst of someone else's joy, I'm in a state of envy. I hate that. Because I like to think that I'm mature, that I'm spiritually grounded, that I'm a good Christian, that I'm past all this childish comparison stuff. But if I'm being honest, self still tries to sit in the center of most stories, most of the time, even when they have nothing to do with me. Putting myself at the center, it's a miserable way to live. Because when I see good things happening for other people, and I feel that tight little twist in my chest, what I'm really saying is, God, everything you're doing for them is kind of bumming me out. It's against me. What a foolish thing to say. What an ugly thing to say. It's a tantrum. God should smack me. God is blessing people around me with families, careers, health, opportunity, success. I don't know the whole story. It doesn't matter. I don't know the prayers that they've cried alone. I don't know what they've sacrificed. I don't know what they're going through. I don't know the least of it. But instead of seeing God's work, envy looks at it with disapproval. That should have been me. They don't deserve that. Woe is me. Gosh, I'm not blessed. It's so foolish. And here's the part that alarms me is, can I really be a blessing or even receive blessing when I'm standing in a self-centered posture? Probably not. When I look at others and see abundance, family, health, promotion, success, I should see evidence of God's hand. Because let's be honest, if those things were to come into my life, I would give God credit, full credit, without hesitation. So why wouldn't I credit God when it's happening for someone else? A hypocritic fool, huh? But here's the uncomfortable truth that I keep bumping into. Envy and jealousy towards others isn't just a problem with them. It's an act of disapproval toward God. I'm literally disapproving of what God's choosing to do. Because envy doesn't just put me above others, it puts myself above God. It says, God, I know better than you. I know better who should be blessed. I know how you should have operated this. I know better. But as a God-fearing Christian, I shouldn't envy anyone. I should bless them, celebrate them, credit God, pray that their eyes see Him clearly in all those things. It's so foolish. Now, someone always asks this question, though, and maybe you're thinking it too, but what happens when good things happen to bad people? Well, first of all, God has the right to call whoever He wants. The flawed, the wretched, the broken, the morally messy. He called me. So when good things happen to people I think don't deserve them, that's not some sort of injustice. Maybe that's evidence that God is calling their hearts too. I hope it is, just like He called me. But here's something that I wrestle with is, Should my heart ache, though, when a non-believer experiences success, abundance, promotions, blessings like that? And the answer is maybe, but not out of envy, but out of more of concern, out of a groaning ache, because that kind of success can quietly, it just turns eyes further from God into the self, towards other idols. Gosh, if I have everything I need, what use do I have for God? We never ask those questions if we don't fall to our knees. We shouldn't envy those people, and we certainly shouldn't frame it as unfair. Those worldly blessings, they anchor our eyes to the world. They're not always blessings. Sometimes they're diversions. Sometimes they're distractions. Sometimes they're deceptions. Sometimes they're tools the enemy has in the long game for souls. So pray for them. Not because you're better, but because you know it's easy to be fooled by things of the world. You know that the ultimate blessing we can experience is God Himself. Not God's favor in the worldly sense. Because when we expect God's favor to meet our expectations or our definition of favor, well, we're turning God into a genie. Good things for good people, bad things for bad people. In the Gospels, Jesus asks the question that really wrecks it all. He says, "What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul?" A soul turned towards self, towards approval, towards applause, false idols. That's not blessing. That's Satan's play, man. Because a self-absorbed life doesn't need meaning or an explanation beyond itself. And that's the source of a lot of misery in this world. Let's be real. Most of the Christians I know, myself included, we didn't submit to Jesus because our life was just so full of so many blessings that I can't handle all of these blessings. I have to lay them at the feet of my Lord and Savior. That's not what happened. No. We submitted because we couldn't carry life on our own anymore. Our own strength couldn't handle it. My submission came when the illusion that I was in control, it just finally collapsed in on itself. I didn't sit down and logically surrender. I just ran out of options. My spirit took over. I hit a low where I needed to believe there was purpose beyond this meaningless grind. There was a God-shaped void in my heart. When I stopped pretending that I had it all together, that I was self-reliant, that's when God rushed in. That leads me to another question. Why do I seek the things of the world? Because I still do. I still want wealth, achievement, abundance, prestige, health. Do I want these things so they can glorify God? Or if I'm being brutally honest, do I want them because, well, I want to be envied? And when I truly examine my motives, oh my gosh, they're ugly. I want to stand out. I want to be somebody. I want people to notice me. I want people to think that I've done something special. I want to be envied. Fool. But if wealth, influence, success ever enters my life, I should want those things to turn attention toward Jesus, not to me, not to self. And if I'm being real, my motives are often rotten. Gosh, even making this video, I've wrestled with how hypocritical it is if it doesn't ultimately point you towards Him. So here's the warning to you and to me, is be on guard against riches and worldly glorification. Not because they're evil, but because of the power they have to quietly shape our motives and redirect our gaze from up to God to the things around us or into ourselves. In 1 John, for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of the life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. What you focus on shapes what you worship, and when your eyes are fixed on self, you worship self. The enemy doesn't have to work very hard when you're self-absorbed. Because if we're immersed in and absorbed in self, what motives do we have to submit, to seek God? It brings me to my conclusion that I keep circling back to. Guard against self. Self is the greatest enemy. From self grow weeds of envy, jealousy, resentment, anger, all the ugly stuff, and motives that feed an insatiable, depthless appetite. You'll never be happy. But just so we're clear, I obviously teach this, but I don't need it. This video is for everyone else.